In the opening scene, we see Moriah, a beautiful French girl with ginger locks and piercing eyes. She stands, looking at the lighthouse on the shore before riding her bike back. Coming to the small cottage house, she stops and admires its beauty, despite it being left out to rot. Promising the house that it will be beautiful again, she looks at the trash that's around her. Driving through the town, she greets the locals until she stops at Morris. He is a florist and has the most beautiful flowers in the world. He gives her a bouquet of lavender flowers and claims that there's no special occasion for a girl to be receiving flowers. Further down the street, she stops at a bakery and greets Regis. Handing her 2 fresh baguettes, Regis wishes her a good day before she leaves. Moriah arrives at her workshop called Belle's Choses, a small workshop hidden on the narrow streets. Inside, she works on a vanity and talks to it like it's a person. Painting the oil, she calls the vanity her favorite work ever. In the town center, we can see a rather lost Ben. Ben is a handsome young man, with sharp features and ocean blue eyes. He stops at a bakery stand and asks the man for directions to the castle. Despite not knowing French, he understands the man and even buys 2 baguettes from him as a sign of gratitude. Continuing on his road, he strolls around the streets looking at his map when he gets hit by a bike. Standing up, he sees Moriah on the bike and asks her whether she's crazy. Moriah argues back, claiming that he's daydreaming in the middle of the road. He calls her a maniac, but she lets him know that bicycles have a way in France. Getting up, he apologizes as he wasn't looking where he was going. But Moriah tells him that it's fine and warns him to be careful around the streets. Arriving at the inn, Moriah is greeted by Jack. He has been in love with her for a long time, but she only sees him as a brother. Looking at the bouquet in her basket, he asks who they're from and she jokes that they are from the most amazing man, Morris. Luckily, her aunt comes to them and saves the day. As they're walking, Moriah complains that she keeps finding trash every time she visits the lighthouse. Her Aunt Catherine suggests she puts up a fence so no one could visit it, and even offers to pay for the expenses. Moriah thanks her for the offer but claims that if she's going to do some renovations, she will be paying with her own money. All of a sudden, Ben appears in front of them, all dirty from the incident. They walk back to the inn where Ben gets changed, and Moriah gets scolded by her aunt for driving like crazy. Ben comes over to introduce himself, and Catherine recalls his reservation. Moriah is shocked to hear that he'll be staying for 2 months, and on top of that, Catherine asks her to finish the paperwork for the reservation. Moriah notices that he's only carrying 1 bag, so she asks where's the rest of them. He claims that his 1 carry-on bag is enough. Fewer bags you have means less hassle. Ben can't help but be interested in the wooden drawers that sit in front of him. However, he is surprised to hear that Moriah is the maker of them. She lets him know about the workshop she has before letting him to his reservation. Moriah delivers her work to Bridget's cafe, and Bridget can't be more thankful. As they sit at the bar, Bridget tells her all about the compliments her work receives daily, and about how many people ask about the artist of the work. Of course, they're surprised to hear that she's a female, but Bridget makes sure to say the best for Moriah. Moriah's success can be noticed, but it is the overworking that doesn't sit well with Bridget. She begs Moriah to take a day off so they can go on an adventure, but Moriah says that she'll think about it. Catherine, Jack, and Moriah sit at a cafe as Moriah shows them the new frames for a wedding she has. Looking up, Jack spots Ben looking lost and comments on it. Catherine calls him over and he reveals that he's looking for a restaurant to eat at. However, he can't help but notice the beautifully drawn frame, so he asks Jack and Moriah whether they were getting married. Already embarrassed from the bike accident, Moriah says that they're not, but Jack finished her sentence by adding yet. The struggle with the language is real for Ben, as we see him plugging the wrong output, which causes the whole floor to run out of electricity. Knowing that it's his fault, he tries to hide from everyone in the morning, but Moriah stops him to ask about it. Trying to mess with him, she lets him know that the person who put out the electricity will go to jail, so Ben gets scared. Not wanting to reveal that he's the one, he asks Moriah for any activity ideas and she tells him to stay away from electricity. Ben decides to go bike riding, not expecting it to be hard. We see him struggling to catch up with the group as he begs for a break. In town, Moriah visits Bridget's cafe once again to bring the rest of the stuff the cafe needs. Bridget thanks her and claims she'll have her shop renovated if she has the money for it. However, Moriah lets her know that even if she had the money, she wouldn't have let her. As they're talking, Moriah spots Ben with a broken bike in his hand, looking confused. Getting out of the cafe, she asks him what happens and he tells her all about it once they sit down. He claims to have been attacked by a sheep, but the girls find it funny how serious he gets about it. They can't help but laugh as they make fun of him. After calming down, Moriah suggests she walks him to the inn as she has to go to the shop. Ben gets to see the workshop for the first time and he is very impressed by its setup. Moriah lets him know that most of the tools are from her grandpa that she added to her collection. She had taken up after her grandfather, inspired by nature to make the best of it. Ben assumes that she has customers lined up, but Moriah admits to being particular with her work because she wants it to have authenticity. Walking out of the shop, they're met by Morris. Ben asks him whether there's a good place to eat and Morris insists he takes them on his coach. They sit down to eat some food and Ben suggests she orders for them. As they wait for the food, Ben asks Moriah about her family. She reveals that her mother's family opened the inn in 1920 and that her father's family were the keepers of the lighthouse. She asks Ben why he's in France, and he reveals that he had come early to learn all about the culture. Upon being there for a couple of days, he learned that the people are very happy, and that they know how to enjoy themselves. The best thing for him, however, is the food. He even admits to having 3 baguettes a day. Being the local that she is, Moriah decides to give him some lessons. Lesson number 1 is quality over quantity. Maybe 1 quality baguette is enough. The food comes and they enjoy their calamari. Later on in the afternoon, as Ben's practicing his French, he hears a crowd of people beneath his window. Getting to the front of the inn, he is greeted by Catherine, who advises him to have the local cider. After they get their drinks, they stand by the side as Catherine asks him how he's enjoying his stay. He claims to love it, and the fact that Moriah has helped him around has made it a lot easier. Calling her amazing, he can't help but stare at her beauty. Catherine snaps him back to reality by asking where his home is. Ben admits that he doesn't have a place to call home because he travels a lot. He hasn't found a place where the desire to stay is as strong as the desire to move on. These words remind Catherine of someone she used to know. After their conversation, Catherine lets Moriah know about the compliments Ben had given her, but Moriah makes it known that she doesn't plan on dating a tourist. However, Catherine has made it her mission to get them together, so when Moriah asks for Jack to help her, Catherine asks Ben instead. They move the part to the side so Moriah can put them together, but as she's putting them, she sees Ben with a runabout about to get in the water. She runs over and warns him that he's gotten a runabout that goes onto a boat and not a boat. He hadn't checked the time, and Moriah warns him that he can get lost, but he promises her to be back in an hour. Finding out that he wants to visit the lighthouse, Moriah suggests she goes with him. They get onto the island and climb to the tower. On the way up, Ben talks about architecture and its importance regarding authenticity. He admits that he loves architecture because he can take something old and make it new, but Moriah argues that it's better to take something old and keep it old. Every part of an old building has its own story and a piece of the designer's heart. As they get to the house, they see a man walking out of it. Moriah runs to the man and warns him that it's private property, but he reveals that he has bought the house and it will be his new home. He shakes hands with Ben and she is surprised to see that they know each other. Ben is there as the designer of the new house and Nicholas is the new owner. Heartbroken, Moriah runs back home and Ben runs after her, apologizing. He promises that the lighthouse won't be touched, but she explains to him that both of them have the same meaning for her. Soon, she realizes that it's pointless for her to explain to him since history doesn't matter to him, and he wouldn't understand it anyway. Returning home, Catherine starts crying while asking her aunt whether she knew about the lighthouse. Catherine asks her to calm down and admits to not having known about the investor. Just as she asks who the investor is, Nicholas knocks on the door. She is shocked to see him at her door after 30 years. He tries to talk to her, but she kicks him out as he didn't even let her know that he was coming. After being kicked out, Nicholas takes a walk with Ben and complains about being the villain in everyone's eyes. Sitting down, he admits that the island is his only home, a place where he grew up and fell in love for the first time. He wanted to feel the same again, but admits that it's not the place but rather the people that make you feel at home. Catherine decides to tell Moriah all about Nicholas and their relationship when they were young. She compares him to a movie star, calling him serious and adventurous. Nicholas had always wanted to study medicine in America. That's why he always loved books as a kid. However, he didn't leave the island to go study but rather to serve in the war. Catherine admits that he wanted to see the world and it was difficult for him to come back after Moriah's parents had died. The next morning, Ben notices everyone ignoring him as he tries to have a conversation with the locals. He comes across Bridget and Moriah, so he asks them whether he can join them. Bridget leaves so they can have a private conversation, and as Ben sits down he starts apologizing. It wasn't in his intention to demolish someone's home as he didn't know the true meaning of it. Being ignored by everyone, he admits that he feels like a public enemy. Moriah reveals that everyone in the village protects one another like their family. As lesson number 2, whenever one of them is hurt, all of the people are hurt. Some time passes and as Moriah's working on her project, she sees the smiley Ben had drawn on the table, so she decides to visit him. Going to the lighthouse, she sees him working so she approaches him. Handing him a bottle of local cider, she apologizes for judging him and admits that he shouldn't be the one shouldering the blame. As far as lesson 2 goes, she understands the people in the town but admits that he shouldn't be judged by everyone because it isn't his fault. Ben accepts her apology and asks for her to show him through her eyes. Entering the house, Moriah lets him know that from the day of its completion, her father's family was the sole owner of it. During the World Wars, the men fought in the war while the women stayed in the house, guarding the lighthouse. Despite her father growing up in the house, her family never owned it. The residence was afforded to the lighthouse keeper for the term of their service. The property always belonged to the government, and once it was decommissioned, it became Moriah's father's dream to buy it. Unfortunately, he never got to realize his dream because he passed away. Tears fill Mariah's eyes as she talks about the history of the house and how it tells the story of many generations of her family. Looking deep into Ben's eyes, she tells him that the house is the only thing that's left of her parents. Catherine is doing some gardening in the backyard when Nicholas comes in. Immediately, she tells him to go home and not to plan anything. However, Nicholas reveals that he's not planning anything. He admits that his intentions were never to open old wounds. It is his home he returned to, and that was expected of him. He asks Catherine why she didn't tell him about Mariah's parents passing, and she claims that he would have been restless, knowing that he wanted to travel the world and pursue his big dreams. However, Nicholas reveals that the tournament of leaving his love behind has kept him from achieving his goals. She is the one he wants to achieve the goals with, and it would be impossible to do otherwise. Catherine talks with Mariah after her talk with Nicholas. She reveals that she ran off instead of finishing the conversation. It made her feel something different that she hasn't felt in a long time. She has realized that the anger inside her isn't there anymore, and she doesn't want to be angry in the future. Nicholas has a chat with Ben as well, so Ben goes to Maria's workshop afterward. He finds her in a rather stressful situation, trying to screw the vintage flathead screws. Ben helps her and they successfully screw the screws. He reveals that he had the conversation with Nicholas and that his heart is in the right place. Mariah is surprised to hear that Nicholas will be keeping the house only to restore it, and he wants her to oversee the project. Mariah will be doing that since she has the skill and she is the only one that will make sure that it's done properly. She tries to deny the offer, but Ben cuts her off before she can say anything else. He understands that it's a disappointing situation and it's not what he had in mind either. Spending a year on the project may have been a lot of work, but Ben agrees that leveling the house won't be a good idea. He asks her not to do the house for him or Nicholas, but for herself and her family. Before he even gets the chance to leave, she agrees to do it. So we see them working on the house a couple of days later. Mariah thanks the workers for coming to complete such a monumental thing for her. She was honored to work alongside every one of them. Reminding them that the aim is to preserve, she asks everyone to be surgical in every approach, using the same care they would as if it is their home. They walk inside to see what they're working with. Mariah lets Ben know that everything was done by her grandfather from the ground to the roof. Noticing the molding around the windows, Ben asks whether there had been some water leakage, and Mariah thinks that there might have. Upon inspecting the house, Ben finds an opening behind a closet, so he calls Mariah over. Pulling the closet out of the way, they see stairs leading down to the basement. After inspecting the surrounding, they find a woman's belongings, among them being love letters. As they work on the house, Catherine decides to do something for herself. Ringing the doorbell at where Nicholas is staying, she waits for him to come with a basket full of groceries in her hand. She recalls how good Nicholas had cooked when they were young, so she hands him the basket in hopes he starts cooking again. However, she doesn't even get the chance to leave before Nicholas invites her to cook with him by saying that cooking is more enjoyable when there are two. Curious, Mariah and Nicholas sit to read the letters and find out that they were written during the war. The letters were written to JP and they were written by someone whose name starts with the first letter of the alphabet. Mariah can't imagine being in love with someone so much but never knowing when you'll see them or when the next letter would arrive. Mariah suggests taking the letters to Catherine and Ben agrees as he joins her. Getting into the house, they are met with Catherine and Nicholas having the time of their life while drinking wine. Catherine reveals that she had invited Nicholas to her kitchen, and even invites Mariah and Ben to stay. As Ben is helping them set the table, Mariah makes sure he learns lesson number 3. A meal is meant to be savored. Always make time to sit and enjoy. Never walk and eat. Ever. Nicholas asks them how the house is coming along, and they say that it's going well but reveal that Mariah's grandparents might have been a part of the French resistance. They mention the basement and the love letter addressed to JP. Catherine reveals that Mariah's grandfather had been referred to JP when he was younger, and reminds Mariah that those letters must have been from before he got married. Ben can't seem to forget the story about the secret love affair, but Mariah asks him to focus on work. They leave the workshop to focus on the design of the house, but they start arguing about it. Ben stops her and lets her know that they'll be grabbing coffee to relax. She tries to deny it, but he reminds her of the third lesson. They sit on a bench discussing the kitchen. Ben shows her a sketch of a pink countertop for the kitchen. Mariah is in awe at how well thought out and with how much care he has made the sketch, so she calls it perfect. Looking at him with a smirk, Mariah reveals that she had read the love letter but promises to let him know the details. They go to the lighthouse where they work on the house, but as they're talking, Ben can't help but admire her beauty. Unfortunately, their moment is interrupted as Catherine and Nicholas come with a basket in their hand. Catherine thanks them for the hard work and gives the basket as a sign of gratitude. Nicholas chimes in and thanks Mariah for teaching him the importance of fighting for things that matter the most, claiming that he owes her a lifetime of gratitude. As the sun goes down, Mariah and Ben sit around the fire while Mariah reads the letters. Reading the last letter, they find out that the woman went to Paris. However, she mentions the rock beyond her bedroom window. It is shaped like a rock and she hopes that they will get married beside that rock one day. Soon after reading that, Mariah realizes that she knows where that place is and claims that her grandfather had taken her there once. While they're on the subject of love, Ben asks Mariah whether she's ever been in love. A little ashamed, Mariah reveals that she has never been in love. She doesn't know what men think of her. Is it her attitude or her work that gets in the way? Relating to her story, Ben admits to being bad in love. Because he moves so much, it is easier for him to leave before it gets too complicated. Realizing that they're the most depressive pair, they start laughing about it. As Mariah tries to grab Ben's glass, he leans in and kisses her passionately. One day, as Mariah's working on a drawer, Catherine walks in and shows her the engagement ring on her finger. Shocked, tears fill her eyes as she finds out that he proposed to her on the sailboat, and that the wedding will be as soon as humanly possible. Things seem to be going great for Mariah as not only is her aunt getting married, but the lighthouse is almost finished. Standing in front of it, she can't help but thank Ben for the amazing job he has done, admitting that she had a fun time the previous few months, and that he makes her smile. Ben feels the same. He thanks her for opening his eyes before he asks her to go on an adventure. They arrive at the famous rock from the letters. However, Ben spots a house across from it, so he suggests they go there. An old lady opens the door and invites them to her backyard. While sitting together, the lady reveals that she is the granddaughter of Adrian. Unfortunately, when her aunt was in Paris, she died in the war, making her an honorable hero. There are no pictures left of her, but the lady pulls out a box of her old belongings. Mariah gets saddened about the story, but the lady tells her that the heart is a wonderful mystery, powerful enough to move mountains, and delicate enough to shatter at the slightest touch. Catherine's wedding day finally arrives. We see her looking beautiful in her white dress and flower crown. Catherine admits to always picturing the moment, but with Mariah in the wedding dress. She admits that she hasn't seen her be that happy in a long time, and it's because of Ben. Mariah reminds her that his life is abroad, and she couldn't leave her family for him. However, Catherine reminds her that no matter where she goes, she will be loved and her family will always be in her heart. Before they go, they hug and encourage themselves to be strong. The ceremony is beautiful, and everyone is happy. The music plays, so the couples stand up to dance. Ben invites Mariah to dance and she accepts, but he looks upset. She asks him what's wrong and he admits that he has been called for a job in Chicago, something that he has worked on for a long time. He lets Mariah know that he will be going and starts apologizing for leaving. But she stops him and claims that he's doing what he always does. Again, he is leaving before things complicate. He suggests coming back, but Mariah asks him not to make her wait for him and his love. The wedding continues and it's time for Mariah to give a speech. Having a speech prepared, she gets ready to read it but stops herself for a second. Finally, she decides to speak from her heart and admits that she doesn't know anything about love. It arrives when you least expect it, sometimes in a place or a person. That person sometimes leaves, and sometimes, just like Nicholas, they come back. She claims that love is everywhere and in everything around us, but unfortunately, we can't control it. That leaves us vulnerable to it, and all we can do is surrender. After finishing the speech, Mariah runs off, but Jack follows her. Despite being in love with her for many years, he encourages her to fight for her love and take risks. Running to the tower, she puts on the light, hoping that Ben would get the hint. Unfortunately, the light doesn't work, but luckily, Ben changes his mind after a man tells him a tragic love story. He yells out for the captain to stop the boat, but soon realizes that the boat won't stop. Mariah sits in front of the lighthouse, disappointed. However, Ben surprises her by returning. They hug and kiss as Ben admits that he's in love with her. Looking at him with tears in her eyes, she admits that she's in love with him as well. As they kiss, the light finally starts working, so they start laughing about it. Things seem to be going great for the pair, as we see them having a toast with Nicholas and Catherine at the newly renovated lighthouse. They clink their glasses in Nicholas and Catherine's names before they're off on their honeymoon. Mariah and Ben had already known that they'll be taking care of the lighthouse, while the other couple are on their honeymoon. But tears fill Mariah's eyes once they tell her that she is the new owner of it. The happy couple drives off into the sunset, while Mariah and Ben are left to look after the lighthouse.